First Lady Jill Biden tested positive for COVID yesterday. Her communications director said the First Lady is double vaccinated, twice boosted, and only experiencing mild symptoms. They should have that refrain pretty down by now. That's what they say about everyone. White House COVID response director, Dr. Ashish Jha, discussed the state of the pandemic yesterday and unexpected difficulties over the past 2 years. Let's watch.
The social science of building trust, of countering misinformation, of not politicizing the most basic of public health measures, that part turned out to be much, much harder than I think many of us expected. I had a mental model 3 years ago, and now you're going to see how naive I was. My mental model was, you get the science right, you build great vaccines, you build good treatments, everybody will come and get it, the pandemic will be over, we're going to be in great shape. Turns out, not so simple.
It's not a lot of, I would like to hear some reflection about why it didn't go exactly as planned. I do think that some of it, some of the politicization has obviously come around, a conservative movement to kind of have a libertarian approach to not, wanting to have mandates, whether it's a vaccine mandate or a vaccine mandate. But some of it also was started at the beginning with the lack of transparency from public health officials about the utility of masks in the first place. I do think that this crisis has grown over time in a way that people have to take accountability for. And there was broad compliance with vaccines and an excitement around vaccines when they first became available in the spring of 2021, because it meant that we could return to normal. And for a while, I think it was a success story until these new variants undermined the messaging that basically said that vaccines were going to prevent transmission in a way that they did not. And I don't think that people are going to have a lot of faith in upcoming vaccine efforts if they don't reckon with how the public health messaging got us to the place we're in now.
Yeah, the public health messaging has been really bad a lot of times, really confusing, contradictory for people, and also, clamping down on the wrong things. The public health officials wanted to stop you from being able to question whether COVID perhaps emerged from a lab. Now that's a view we're allowed to discuss because it has enough legitimacy, certainly not proven, and a lot of people still think it's more likely to have emerged in nature. But that was something that you were derided as a conspiracy theorist or a racist or something, which never made any sense for talking about, or for questioning masks all along. Now they're saying that really, unless you're wearing the very sturdiest masks, the lesser masks are not doing very much good at all. That's something regular, sort of well-respected public health officials are saying regarding at least the new variants. Maybe that was not true for the original strain. And then, of course, as you said, the messaging on what vaccines were doing for you just changed so dramatically. And look, I get that science is a process, and you can say that this is a new disease, and certain assumptions that were made early proved out to be wrong, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was wrong to make those assumptions. But I guess there was just if you're asking questions, like only we're allowed to ask we ask the questions. If you're questioning us, you're impugning science itself, which is the famous kind of frustrated remark from Dr. Fauci, when internally these people are having all sorts of debates all the time and have changed their minds all the time. So it just doesn't, I think, comport with the experience most people had of the pandemic, which is a very confused, understandably confused in some ways, public health reaction, in other ways just indefensible. I mean, the CDC's screw up with testing early on is totally indefensible. Yeah. Totally, the institution was built to handle something like this and completely failed.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, right? Because on one hand, there is a certainty that comes down in messaging about the science that's intended, I think, to push back against people who are trying to kind of opportunistically create more ambiguity than exists because either they have a political motive, like opening businesses back up because they are themselves business owners or industry folks who needed the economy to get back going, even if that was kind of against public health recommendation, or whether because there are quite literal political kind of electoral consequences for looking like you're coming down against what had become politicized as like a science, more liberal environment. But these things are in tension with each other. And the more there is a conservative politicization of these issues, the more the liberals are going to pretend that science is a subjective thing and not provide the kind of nuance that would give it a cushion when it changes its mind about something. And it feels like one of those finger traps we used to play with as a child, and I don't know which side is going to give first or if any side will give at all. But Florida Governor Ron DeSantis recently gave a press conference just yesterday about teacher recruitment that was wrapped up with this COVID conversation. Let's take a listen.
They lied to us about the mRNA shots. They said if you take it, you will not get COVID. That is false. That is not true. And they continue to say, even now when the evidence is so overwhelming, that not only is that not true, people that have multiple boosters, you're definitely at risk of getting it. There's no question about that. So it's just time and time again, I think you've seen ideology placed over data and evidence. And then what happens is that they will say something like, okay, 6 weeks of masks will end COVID. So that's what they claim. It doesn't happen. And then what they'll do is they will kind of move the goalposts and say, well, only 95% wore it. So now, and they will constantly try to shift because they will never admit that their ideology was incorrect.
Ideology is an interesting word choice. The governor also commented on Florida's non-woke status.
In the state of Florida, because we've taken on woke corporations, we've taken on ESG. Obviously, in the classroom, we've battled a lot of ideologies. But what I've said is that the state of Florida is the place where woke goes to die. We are not going to let this state. We're not going to let this state descend into some type of woke dumpster fire. We're going to be following common sense. We're going to be following, facts, and that's just really, really important.
Put it on a license plate.
The war on woke, Briahna.
Get rid of the Sunshine State. Change all the license plates. It's now Florida, the state where woke goes to die. I mean, okay, Robby.
It's a winning political message. What can you say? It's a winning political message in the Republican world. It has some, you have to concede, it has some crossover appeal. If it's especially, I think, divorced from the person of Donald Trump. Look at the way sort of Glenn Youngkin pulled it off. I think that's a model for Republicans. Maybe DeSantis probably leans into it a little too much for a general election. I'm talking, of course, about presidential at this point, but that's the strategy, and it has a lot going for it.
Here's the thing. He says he wants to go after woke corporations. So let me get this straight. Corporations who saw unprecedented profits at the expense of consumers, workers, voters over the course of the pandemic. You're going to take all these exploiters and put them into two camps. The ones that you deem woke by some metric, because there's no such thing as a woke corporation. They're all soulless, blood-sucking, profit-driven miscreants as far as I'm concerned. But you're going to
tell us how you really feel about the Disney Corporation, Briahna.
You're going to quarter them into two arbitrary buckets and say, we're going to go after these ones because they used HR language that I didn't like, and they put an LGBT flag outside of the business, or whatever constitutes woke. I'm not an expert. And then the other corporations are apparently off the hook, no matter how much they are raising wages, exploiting their workers, not providing benefits, cutting people's hours to below 40 hours a week so they don't have to give required benefits to the people that they are working for them and creating their profits, not paying out healthcare benefits, cheating on their taxes. That's not the focus. And then voters apparently are charmed by all of this because wokeness, I have a perfectly valid critique of wokeness myself, but wokeness, I'm sorry, is not the thing that's keeping your refrigerator empty and your gas tank empty. It's not. And this is an obvious sleight of hand that Ron DeSantis and the conservatives are doing to make their struggling base that deserves real policy prescriptions to address the concerns that they rightly have. They're being deflected with this kind of nonsense. And it's frustrating to me as someone who legitimately wants their lives to be better that this is a substitute for substantive politics these days.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. So I agree with some of what you said. I share as a more, as a libertarian and a more kind of a business-friendly Republican, I guess. You're going to hate that, so many of our viewers. But I do not think it's necessarily a great use of the state, of the government's time to like persecute corporations over their HR policies or their Pride Day flags or whatever stuff they're doing. To the extent, there's wokeness has infected our public schools or our institutions of government in ways that doesn't comport with civil rights law, I am more willing to say something should be done. If corporations have policies you don't like, speech-related policies you don't like, you should probably just don't don't be a customer of those
boycott,
corporations, I guess. Yeah. So right. So substantively, probably I agree with you that this is not my favorite area of intense focus for Republican politicians. Where I guess I do disagree with you is that I don't know that it is a sleight of hand or it is a deflection. I mean, they're being very transparent and saying, right, we're going to go after these corporations if they do X, Y, and Z, and otherwise we're leaving them alone because we do want to leave businesses alone. And it seems by and large their voters and many people, a large portion of the country says, yeah, we're good with that. We just don't like these things. We don't like the things we associate with wokeness. We don't that's it.
I think everyone in Florida should go home, make themselves a little voodoo doll that says woke on it, stick all the pins in it, tear up pieces of paper with woke written on it over and over again, scream at the TV set, unsubscribe from the weed channel, do whatever makes you feel good about ending wokeness, participate in your school board, make sure they never teach beloved, all of those things. However, just if you could also at the same time recognize that 1 in 5 Florida corporations paid no income tax in 2020, and also maybe focus on those kinds of things, I suspect you might get a better return on the quality of your life. You'll
appreciate this, Briahna. For the latest edition of Reason Magazine, for our print edition, I wrote about the wrong and misguided efforts to get Beloved out of the curriculum. So you'll have to check that out.
A Toni Morrison Stan King. We love to see it, Robby.
All right, more Rising right after this. Stay tuned.